Okay, I'm making this video because I'm going to put up one on school vouchers in general, but I made that video to talk about this video, which is over the weekend with that giant omnibus spending bill that Congress just passed. They killed the Washington D.C. Um, voucher program, which allowed public school students in Washington D.C. to get federal funds to go to private schools where they could get a better education. And it was killed by my very own senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, who is one of the dumbest senators that has ever been elected, and certainly one of the dumbest in the Senate today. Now, again, this isn't a true libertarian idea, or a true Austrian idea, I should say, that I'm talking about. And I know there are people who will watch this video and say, well, you call yourself the Austrian, how can you support taking federal funds? Again, I'm not 100% happy about taking other people's money to send kids to school, but again, I'm making this video on the grounds that if we can't dismantle public education, which I would love to do, and I would be the first to support dismantling public education, then the system has to be run better, and it should include school vouchers, because that at least gives a student a choice of saying, I'm not just going to give my money to the state, I'm going to give it to a private enterprise instead if I think they're going to give me a better education. So anyway, in this bill, the DC school vouchers, which were essentially a program that was started by George Bush in 2004, which stated that in Washington, D.C., where they have one of the worst public school systems in the country, absolutely terrible, they would give a certain amount of scholarships every year to students so they could attend private schools instead, and possibly go to a place where they're going to get a better education. And this has been verified by the fact that all their test scores have gone up, and the students are learning more, and these students are actually going to college where they probably would have been joining a gang instead of joining a fraternity if they hadn't gone to these private schools. But unfortunately, the system is now coming to an end. In this spending bill that Congress passed, Dick Durbin slipped in an amendment which essentially stated that after next year, no more funding would be granted to this program, which essentially kills it. It states that we don't want to pay for it anymore. It means we don't like it, and it is dead. And so all these students now that are getting scholarships to go to private schools are now going back to the public school system. And for these kids, I cannot tell you how upset I am for you. For those that don't know anything about some of the really bad public school systems in general, I live near one. Chicago Public Schools is definitely one of the worst, but still not as bad as Washington, D.C. There are areas in the United States where public education is truly atrocious, and Washington, D.C. takes the cake. A book I can recommend for anyone who would like to learn a little bit about it is not based entirely on that system, but it talks about a student who was in that system. Is a book that my school gives out for free for some reason called A Hope in the Unseen, about a kid who goes to a Washington, D.C. public school and eventually goes through affirmative action, no less, and I hate affirmative action, but goes through affirmative action to Brown University and actually makes something of himself coming out of this horrible public school system. And it talks, and you can read the first part of that book and learn about how bad the experience was for him, how bad the teachers were, how much gang violence they had, and why someone like me will criticize Washington, D.C. public schools. So again, Hope in the Unseen if you want to learn more about it. But what it comes down to is these public school systems like Washington, D.C. are just deplorable. They're really, really bad. And now we're sending these students, predominantly African-American students, mind you, back into the system where they're really fucked, okay? And I'm someone who really believes in no matter what system you're in, you can try to make something out of yourself. But even I acknowledge that if you're going to send someone to the pits of hell in regards to education, they really don't stand too much of a chance of making something out of themselves. They don't have the teachers that want to teach, and they are surrounded by gang violence. You're not going to get too many flowers, coming up through the concrete in a system like that. So again, my question to all those socialists who believe in the greater good, and to who believe in helping those who are underprivileged. Why is it whenever we talk about school vouchers, where clearly these kids were getting better educations, and clearly these kids were being offered better educational opportunities, why is it all of a sudden that we can't have these federal funds going to these kids, and instead we're sending them back into one of the worst school systems in the country? Why do you socialists support a public option for education, but when it comes to school vouchers, oh no, that's unfair. That's bad because it hurts the public schools. These public schools were bad long before vouchers were ever thought of. They've been horrible as long as anyone can remember. The same with CPS, Chicago Public Schools, have been bad as long as anyone can remember. They do not get better. The students have very, very bad futures when they come out of these schools, and yet socialists do not support voucher systems that could possibly save these kids from the horrible schools the government mandates they must go to, and that the government mandates are actually good institutions. So again, I'm making this video after the one I made on school vouchers to talk about what happens when you kill voucher programs. And again, for all those who think voucher programs are evil, go tell those kids who are now going back into these shitty DC schools that killing the voucher system was really good for them, and telling them that they're going to get a better education at the school that's laced with gang members and horrible teachers, and look into their faces and, you know, tell them, oh, well, you know, you're really going to be better off doing this, okay? If you can pull off that lie, man, you should go work for the fucking IRS or AIG and just spin more lies. But yeah, so DC voucher program has been killed. Again, not a true Austrian idea, but something that I think has to be considered if we're not going to get government out of public education, which I support 100%. So again, killed the vouchers. Don't know why. Students fucked. You know, another great move by the U.S. government.